Hi, everybody. I'm Skip Elshammer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films and we talk about them, we think about them. Hope everybody had a good weekend. That last film was from the Mogul Brothers collection, which was which was in New York. It got split up into what is now at the Library of Congress and is at Oregon Archives. And yes, zebras. That's what we just saw. All right, this next film has it's a Coronet film. Happily been scanning a bunch of the Coronet films on behalf of Coronet. This one, can you recognize the celebrity or the actor? Let me know if you're lost. Enjoy.
You know, I've been thinking, the world can be interesting sometimes.
You mean like right now when there's nothing to listen to or to look at or to read?
Yes, except for you and me, there's nothing to pay attention to or get interested in.
Well, maybe I can do something.
You know, I've been thinking, the world can be pretty dull and uninteresting sometimes.
You mean like right now when there's nothing to listen to or to look at or to read?
Yes, except for you and me, there's nothing to pay attention to or get interested in.
Well, maybe I can do something about it. For instance, look at that.
A coronet film. Those are just words.
Yes, but words make life interesting. Words can tell the name of a film. Fun with words. From words to sentences. And they can tell about a person who helped to make the film.
Well, okay. The words were there all right, but I didn't see any sentences.
That's the next thing I was going to mention. Using words to make sentences. I'll start with words first, and then I'll work up to sentences.
You mean you'll talk about them?
No, I think I'll let you see for yourself by looking at an imaginary person at a Mr. Brown, I'll call him. A friendly, neighborly man who likes to tell stories. But imagine that when Mr. Brown tells his stories, he uses only naming words, the kind of words we call nouns.
Boy, dog, house, mother, father, toy. That's not much of a story. The words don't make sentences.
That's right. A string of nouns together by itself doesn't make much of a sentence. So let me set it up a different way. Mr. Brown can use nouns. And he can also use doing words, the action words we call verbs.
Boy runs, dog barks, girl sits, frog hops. These could be sentences.
Yes, a noun and a verb together can make a short sentence. Each pair of words is arranged so it makes sense. It's what we call a complete thought. Capital letters and periods are all we need to make them look like sentences.
Well, maybe they're sentences, but they don't tell much, and they're not very interesting.
Used by themselves, nouns and verbs don't make much of a story. But there are words that do add meaning to verbs and nouns. We'll call them modifiers. And maybe Mr. Brown can use some of them in his sentences.
Little boy has big balloon. Strong wind blows boy's balloon. Free balloon flies away. Little boy cries sadly. Those are better sentences, but he still needs a few kinds of words like a and the once upon a time, things like that.
No sooner said than done. Now, watch Mr. Brown tell it.
Once upon a time, a little boy had a big red balloon. A big wind blew at the boy's balloon. The balloon flew away. It flew high in the sky. The little boy cried sadly. Hey, that makes a better story.
Yes. The nouns, verbs, modifiers, and other words all went together to make sentences.
But there was a lot to read. From now on, can't we hear Mr. Brown?
All right. I'll give him a voice so that he can tell you the stories himself.
There once was a train full of toys.
And I'll set it up so we actually see the stories as he tells them.
The train had to go over a big mountain. Over the mountain was a town. The toys on the train were for boys and girls in the town. The engine of the train broke down. A big new engine came by. The broken engine asked for help. The big new engine said, no. An old, dirty engine came by. The broken engine asked for help. The old, dirty engine said, no. Then a happy little engine came by. It looked too little to pull the train. It pulled the train, though. It pulled it over the mountain. The boys and girls of the town got their toys.
How's that?
Well, it was all right. But there was something I noticed about the sentences.
Let me show you one. There. The broken engine asked for help. Now, what did you notice?
That it's short, and it has one idea in it. It has one naming word and one doing word.
That's true. The sentence has only one noun and one verb. Most of the sentences in the story are like that. And most of them tell what things do. The broken engine asked for help. That was what it did. Understand?
I think so. And I was wondering, can you put some short sentences together so they make longer ones?
Of course. Now listen, and I'll have Mr. Brown tell another story. And this time, he'll combine some of the shorter sentences into longer ones.
There once was a giant lumberman named Paul Bunyan, and he lived in the North Woods.
See? The idea that there was a man and the place where he lived. Two ideas combined in one sentence.
His helper was a giant blue ox. One day, a lumberman complained to Paul. There was trouble down at the river, and Paul went to look. It was a log jam. The river was crooked, and the logs could not float downstream. So Paul Bunyan caught two blizzards at the North Pole, and they blew on the river and froze it. Then he and his ox pulled on the frozen river, and they straightened it. From then on, the river was straight, and the logs floated downstream.
You see how Mr. Brown combined short sentences to make longer ones?
Can I see one of those sentences?
Of course. The river was crooked, and the logs could not float downstream. What do you think?
It seems more grown up, the way it combines two ideas, one about the shape of the river, and the other about where the logs could float.
And another reason why sentences in this story are interesting is that they have words in them to tell what things look like. The river was crooked. That was what it looked like. And the log could not float downstream. The crooked look of the river explains why. So now you've seen Mr. Brown use two different kinds of sentences. But they're not the only kinds. For instance, there's a combined sentence with two thoughts. But one thought is more important than the other. Watch for it in this story.
Once there was a very little boy. Because he was as small as a man's thumb, they called him Tom Thumb. Even when he grew a little bigger, Tom always got into trouble. Though he loved his parents, Tom left home. After many adventures, he was swallowed by a fish. When he came out, he found himself in King Arthur's court. He wanted to be a knight. One day, Tom saw a spider stealing the king's gold. Though he was not as strong as the spider, he fought bravely. He won, and the king made him a knight. Though Tom Thumb was very small, he was very brave.
Do you see what I mean about those sentences?
I'm not sure.
Well, let me show you one. You see, there are two ideas combined. First, the idea that he loved his parents, and then the idea that Tom left home. But the word though makes one idea sound less important than the other. Though he loved his parents, that sounds less important. Tom left home, that sounds more important. And another thing about the words in this sentence, they tell how people feel. Though he loved his parents, that's how he felt about them, Tom left home. Do you understand?
I think I do.
And do you understand what I was talking to you about a little while ago?
You mean that words make life so much more interesting by telling us things?
That's right, words.
Like those? The words tell us that it's the end of a film.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stop thinking about words and sentences.
I guess not. You say I can start with nouns and verbs and work up the sentences. Well, how am I going to use nouns and verbs in the story about my vacation?
Yes, some of you recognize him. His name is Spencer Milligan, and he was born in Chicago, which Cornet was based in a suburb of Chicago. So was this one of the first films that he was in? Supposedly he was in Sleeper in 1973, and then Land of the Lost in 1974. Land of the Lost is what I was referring to, and we actually showed an episode of that on our Saturday Morning Dinah show, which was on the Found Footage Festival YouTube channel, and actually got to talk with Sid Croft. And yeah, so he plays his dad, and what a weird film. This film was really kind of strange, and I think I have others in this series, which are all in this kind of darkened room, and yeah, just, I don't know, very strange. Let's learn about the Ohio River. Enjoy.
Some rivers are known for their size, some for their beauty, some for their water power. The Ohio River is known primarily for its traffic. Millions of tons of coal are floated down the Ohio each year, along with oil products, cement, metal pipe, sulfur, and many other massive bulky products, making the Ohio the busiest inland waterway in the United States. Why is the Ohio such an active thoroughfare? The answer lies in the history of the river and in its geography. The Ohio is formed by the Monongahela and Allegheny rivers at Pittsburgh. It ends at Cairo, Illinois, where it joins the Mississippi. Between Pittsburgh and Cairo, the Ohio flows southward and westward 981 miles, separating 5 states along the way. The westward course of the Ohio has played a vital role in the history of the United States. Pioneers crossed the rugged Appalachians and headed for the Ohio as a natural highway to the west. Daniel Boone led settlers over the famed Wilderness Road through the Cumberland Gap to tributaries of the Ohio. Others traveled the National Road, which led to Wheeling, West Virginia, one of the early riverbank towns. Many families arrived at Fort Pitt, which later became the city of Pittsburgh. Located at the head of the Ohio, Pittsburgh became known as the gateway to the west. Here, settlers bought boats. These were crude, flat-bottomed, flatboats. Barrels and boxes of household goods, along with tools and livestock. These were the things the settlers took along with them. Long-handled paddles, called sweeps, were used to guide the boats downriver. The power came from the river itself, the westward-flowing Ohio that carried cargoes to the fertile lands along the valley. Produce from the farms, corn, wheat, tobacco, and pork, was sent down the Ohio to the Mississippi and on to New Orleans. It was an easy ride, downstream. But getting the boats upstream, that was another matter. Sometimes horses were used. Sails were even tried. But it was steam power introduced in the middle 1800s that made two-way transportation practical. Goods could now be shipped more rapidly and economically, especially upstream. With the growth in transportation and trade in the Ohio Valley, settlers continued to flock in from the east. Trading posts on the river grew into villages. Here's the way Louisville, Kentucky looked in 1798. By 1835, Louisville had become a fair-sized town. By 1851, Louisville had become a small city. Here's the way Cincinnati looked at the same time. Sailboats and flatboats continued to be used along the Ohio, but the steamboat had become the dominant means of transportation. Today, the stern wheeler is a curiosity for tourists who want to relive the experiences of a century ago. Up to about the middle 1800s, people along the Ohio depended upon the river primarily for transportation and upon the land for farming. But there were two other features which were to lead to a more industrialized economy. The Ohio, along with its network of rivers and streams, forms a watershed that extends into 14 states. A tremendous volume of water pours from the major tributaries into the Ohio, making it second to the Mississippi in the total volume of water carried. The Ohio watershed is also endowed with a vast quantity of coal. The Appalachian and the eastern interior coal fields are the largest coal fields in North America. Coal and water have contributed to make the Ohio Valley today a booming center of industry. Sprawling steel mills thrive along the shores of the Ohio, each with a voracious appetite for coal and water. Vast quantities of water and coal are also used in steam plants along the river. In these plants, steam power, produced by burning coal, is used to generate low-cost electricity, which in turn lures other industries to the valley. Electric power has brought aluminum plants with giant electric ovens used in the refining of aluminum. Atomic energy plants in the valley use more power and water than some small countries. Petroleum refineries and chemical plants have also been attracted to the Ohio by plentiful electricity, coal, and water. Industrial development naturally creates jobs. Millions of people make their living in the Ohio Valley. This helps explain the large population of present-day cities along the river. Flatboats and log cabins have given way to factories, office buildings, bridges, and highways. Cincinnati is an industrial and commercial center of the Middle West. Pittsburgh is one of the world's largest producers of steel. Other major cities along the Ohio are Wheeling, West Virginia, Huntington, also in West Virginia, and Louisville, the largest city in Kentucky. The growth of cities along the Ohio has not been without its problems. Water pollution is one. Modern water treatment plants make wastes and sewage harmless before being poured into the river. But there are still places where industrial wastes are dumped into the Ohio without adequate processing. Parts of the river remain poisonous to fish, unsafe to swim in, and unfit to drink. Floods have been another problem along the Ohio. In past years, floods have caused hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage. To help control the river, the U.S. government has constructed a series of dams. Locks within the dams provide passage for boats and barges. Several barges are generally hooked together and pushed by a single towboat. This is an efficient way of moving the barges, but it has created certain problems. Just a few years ago, many of the locks were too short to accommodate a long string of barges. So the units had to be separated at each dam and taken through the locks piecemeal, wasting both money and time. To end this waste, new dams are being constructed and new locks are being built to accommodate longer strings of barges. This new lock can hold a tow of barges up to 1,200 feet long, twice the length that could be handled previously. It's an enormous load, but a modern diesel-powered towboat can easily move it along this smooth river highway. From high above, you can see that the new dams have transformed parts of the Ohio into wide pools, deep enough to assure dependable navigation. The pools also provide enormous volumes of water for industries and cities. Additional water is supplied by tributaries of the Ohio. This is Kentucky Dam on the Tennessee River. It forms Kentucky Lake. This is Barkley Lake on the Cumberland River, another tributary of the Ohio. These man-made lakes have greatly increased the water available for fish and other wildlife, and for outdoor recreation. But the prime value of the river is still transportation. Remember that bulky raw materials, as well as manufactured goods, can be moved up and down the more than 900 miles of the Ohio quite easily and at low cost. Problems remain to be worked out in using this river. Problems of waste disposal, flood control, and navigation. But that's the path of progress along such a busy thoroughfare as this. The busiest inland water highway in the United States, the Ohio River.
Sorry. I just took a big bite of chicken just as that ended. All right. Behind me I have a film scanner set up. And right there. And what we will do is watch a film on the scanner. Yeah, what is this? Oh, yeah. It is Paramecium, Euglena, and Amoeba. It's the three wise men. All right, enjoy.
I've been looking through this microscope. It's very like the ones you are using. And an admirable little instrument it is. Magnifies up to 200 or 300 times. But I find there are some difficulties with it. As you work with it, it's not too steady, and it tends to jiggle around somewhat. It's very difficult to get the light just perfect, so you see the most out of the material that you are studying. And the material is so interesting. I've been looking at this Paramecium and Euglena and Amoeba. I think it'd be nice to look at them through a better microscope. Now this is much better, not just because it's bigger, but because it's made with the utmost skill and precision. It's very steady. As you move the focusing or do any other adjustments, it doesn't jiggle. You can move them with the greatest delicacy and accuracy. The lenses are about as perfect as you can get. And you can change the light. You can change it so it looks deep into the interior of things, or so the background is dark and the thing itself is brilliantly lighted. Doing all these things then, you can watch with your eyes, or you can place here a motion picture camera. And so we can record on film all the interesting things that you want to see. So we have done that. Let us look at that film. Do you recognize these? Of course you do. You're watching Paramecium, or one of its close relatives. And what can you tell about it by watching? Are they all the same shape? Are they all the same size? Are they all built in the same way? Here is one swimming around by itself. It's not the same kind as the ones you just saw, but it's definitely a Paramecium. Now as you watch it, what do you see it doing? Is it swimming in a flat plane, the way you would swim on the surface of the water? Or does it go down deeper, and then does it come up toward you? Can you see if it makes a spiral as it swims, if it twists as it goes through the water? Now look at its shape. Can you see if the outside is stiff and rigid, or whether it's flexible? Let's take a closer look at this. Now, with some red particles in the water, watch here as it squeezes past one clump of these. Do you see how the cell wall is dented in? And what else can you see in this magnified view? Here's the nucleus. That's easy to find. Here's something else very interesting because of this movement in the water right here. This curved, indented part of the Paramecium seems to be sweeping particles into the inside of the cell. Here you can see how the red particles in the water have been swept into the cell and gathered together in clumps in what we call food vacuoles. What is this thing that appears and disappears, that expands and contracts? It's called the contractile vacuole, and in Paramecium there are two of them. What do you think they do for the cell? Let's watch how this Paramecium moves through the water, and think how it does this. Can you see any equipment? Any fins, any paddles by which it swims? What makes it go? As you look more closely at this, what do you see? Do you notice that flickering along the outside of the cell wall? Do you see the particles in the water as they move by? Do you think there's something here pushing against the water? If there is, why can't we see it? Here, with more particles in the water, the currents in the water are even more clear to you. Is there something here, perhaps, moving so quickly that we can't quite see it? Here, if you watch very carefully around the outside of the Paramecium, you can see the equipment by which it moves. There are these tiny hair-like things that beat against the water in rhythmic waves, which move the Paramecium through the water. Also, the action of these sweeps food into the gullet. These are called cilia. You have to look rather carefully to see them. So now you know what it is that moves the Paramecium through the water. And here are some other microscopic creatures moving around. Do you recognize Euglena among them? How would you describe the shape? Like a cigar? Like a pickle? And what kind of wall does this cell have? Is it like the Paramecium, fairly firm, but elastic and capable of being dented? Let's watch. What characteristic do you think this cell wall would have that would allow these remarkable changes of shape, and after this change would let it resume its long shape and swim away again? Watch how the stuff inside the cell is pushed and pulled as the Euglena changes shape. It's difficult to see the nucleus here because the whole interior is densely packed with material There's a granular stuff, and there are those dark, heavy green bodies. Those green bodies are very interesting. You saw them before in plant cells. But does this look like a plant cell? Does it act like a plant cell? Is there a front end? Does it ever back up like the Paramecium? Or does it turn completely around when it changes direction? Look at the front end. You can see a thing like a whiplash that is lashing about in the water. This whiplash-like thing, this equipment by which the Euglena moves through the water, very interesting thing. As you saw, from the front end of the cell, there extends this long lash, and it's really about as long as the length of the cell itself. And as it twists and spirals in the water, it pulls the body, the pickle-shaped body of the Euglena after it through the relatively thick stuff of the water. Here is the amoeba. Does it have any definite fixed shape? Do you see any movement at all? Doesn't seem to swim about, does it? But watch here. Do you see any changing going on? What do you think could be causing this? Let's look more closely. Looking at the granular stuff inside the cell, you see that there's a flowing going on. The whole inside of the cell is flowing down into that extension. And as this material flows, the extension moves forward, changing the shape of the amoeba. You can see here that the material from the whole cell is flowing down, is moving, and this is how the amoeba moves. By extending a part of itself and then transferring all of the inside of the cell into that extension, it seems to pour itself from one place to another. And yet those who have worked on this, although they have some 12 theories, do not yet know precisely how this movement occurs. With this dark background, you see an amoeba, and Paramecium and Euglena also, and you can compare their size. Watch how it flows down as if to catch the Paramecium in these indentations. Do you think it ever catches one? What's inside here? It's a Paramecium. But the pale color is because it has been partly digested. So you see that this flowing of the amoeba can also be used to surround and capture food, which is later digested inside. Before we leave the microscope, let's look at that fascinating flowing of the cell again, that movement so characteristic of amoeba. There, with that better microscope and all the perfect adjustment for lighting and things of that sort, you could see more, couldn't you? You could see more clearly, you could understand better, and you could answer some of the questions that had come up in your mind. But you also realized that you'd been seeing these things before with your own microscope. And now that you've seen them here so much better, you're going to go back, and using your own microscope, you'll be able to see much more. So you're going to study again Paramecium and Euglena and Amoeba. And in your study of these, in the watching you now will do, I wish you the best of luck.
That microscope early on, that little small one, it's, you can't keep it in focus. It's like tiny. It's ugh. I kind of liked his patter. I kind of liked how he was kind of excited, and yeah, I think I might want to try to find more of him. 1962 made that, is when that was made. And yeah, what do we got here? Well, this is probably more microscope related stuff. Let's try to macroscope something here. Yeah, we talked about Ohio, but we where I kind of grew up around there. Was born near Pittsburgh, but then in the 4th grade I moved to North Carolina, and this film covers the area that I moved to, the Southeastern States. Enjoy.
Look of the Southeast's land. Climate and soil are its two distinctive features. The subtropic to temperate climate and the potentially productive soil. The Southeast is also a place of large natural river systems. The highest mountains east of the Rockies. Rolling hill country, bluegrass country, and even rock plateaus. But geographically, the region's chief distinction is its warm climate and abundant rainfall, and its growing season, longer on the average than any comparable area in the United States. The southeastern region is one of the 6 major regions into which we may divide the United States. Politically, it is marked off into 11 separate states: Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Arkansas. It was in the Southeast that the first permanent English colony was established, at Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. It was to the Southeast that the first Negro slaves were brought a few years later. Many northern colonists moved into this region as land grew scarce at home. White settlement was accompanied by a steady flow of slave ships to the southeastern ports. Gradually, a plantation system developed. New lands were cleared for tobacco. Cotton spread across the south. Cane prospered in the delta, and land northwards was planted in corn. This produce was shipped to market by flatboat and later by steamboat. Cotton had become king. But by 1860, the basically wasteful one-crop system could not compete with the growing industry of the rest of the nation. The economic and political conflict could not be settled except by war. For the Southeast, a whole way of life suddenly changed. Along with much that changed, much remains. The landmarks are still there. Washington's Mount Vernon, Jefferson's home at Monticello, the monuments to Lee, great general and educator. Today, an expanded and mechanized agriculture is still the greatest single occupation of the southeastern people. About 1/3 of the total population live by farming. An equal number outside the cities who do not farm are classified as rural non-farm. There are 4 major farming subregions: the subtropical fruit belt, the truck farming belt, the mixed farming belt to the north, and the great central cotton belt. The subtropical fruit belt includes the huge citrus groves of Florida, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and the cane and rice fields of the deep south. From the truck farming belt along the entire coast, vegetables are now shipped to local markets and to markets in colder regions. On the uplands of the mixed farming belt grow corn, small grains, peaches, apples, and other fruits that have long characterized the southern Appalachian area. Here, too, cattle are raised. The cotton belt, however, is still the most extensive subregion. Although the South no longer depends on this cash crop, it is important as a source of cotton cloth and cottonseed products. In addition to the plantings of cotton, winter wheat, and corn are the tobacco crops. This leading southeastern cash crop has been a major product for more than 3 centuries. But the grip of cotton and tobacco economy has been loosened throughout much of the Southeast, as seen in the strong trend toward livestock, dairying, and poultry raising. Another major trend has been the decrease in the number of tenant farmers and a corresponding increase in the size of the average farm. In many parts of the region, the soil is impoverished. Erosion and excessive rainfall have taken a heavy toll. But crop rotation, soil-building crops, and enormous quantities of fertilizer have helped restore the soil's fertility. Altogether, the Southeast's major agricultural activities provide the livelihood for 9 million people. Once, periodic floods of the Tennessee River and its tributaries ravaged the countryside. Now they are controlled by a great system of dams, which also supply electric power, essential to the industrial and urban growth. Much of the Southeast's industry is based on its own agricultural products and natural resources. Textile mills, the biggest industry, attract 1/4 of the region's industrial workers. Here, cotton from southern soil is woven into cloth used throughout the nation. Although textile manufacture was once a New England monopoly, today the Southeast's cotton spindles greatly outnumber those of the Northeast. Cottonseed has become a valuable industrial byproduct, yielding vegetable oils and 1/3 of the nation's protein meal feeds. The region's tobacco crops supply its factories, which turn out the world's largest number of tobacco products. More and more foods grown during the long season are processed locally before being shipped to northern markets. The forests are still a rich resource in the Southeast. From these forests come logs to be converted into furniture, lumber, and paper products. Into the steel mills of Birmingham flow southern coal and iron from nearby sources to feed the furnaces. Here, deep in the South, is the source of roughly 10% of the nation's annual output of iron and steel. Aluminum ware is among the newest southeastern products. And Arkansas's mines supply about 90% of the nation's bauxite, our biggest domestic source of aluminum. The Southeast provides a growing market for the goods of other regions. As a producer, the Southeast sends out cotton, both in unpressed bales and in the form of finished textiles, cigarettes, cigars, and pipe mixtures, vegetables raised on its truck farms, fruit from its upland orchards and subtropical citrus fruit farms, lumber, furniture, and aluminum. Into the Southeast flow goods from the other regions. From the Northeast, machine tools, small manufactures, shoes, steel, locomotives, and investment capital. From the Middle States, automobiles, farm machinery, and wheat products. From the Northwest, metals, wool, and wheat. From the far west, motion picture films, seafood, certain fruits and vegetables. From southwest, cattle and petroleum products. So in what it sends out, cotton, tobacco, fresh and processed fruits, and vegetables and forest products, and in what it receives in turn from other regions, the Southeast reflects an increased balance of its industry and agriculture. The pattern of rural and urban life has changed, and yet sections of the Southeast retain much of an essentially rural style of life. The farmhouse in the fields, the cabin on the hillside, the small country school or the newer consolidated school, the local country store and gas station, the church down the road, the courthouse square on a Saturday afternoon. In contrast with this pattern, an urban way of life has developed in the Southeast. In cities like Birmingham, Richmond, and Atlanta, this fairly recent urban way of life is seen in the homes, in the schools, the churches, in the size of shopping districts and tourist facilities, in the industrial activity. The trend to the city continues. Already there are 5 cities of over 300,000 and 15 other cities with over 100,000 people. But the Southeast today is known for the region where new techniques and diversified farming have revitalized agriculture, where industry, coming into its own, has harnessed the power of rivers to create new sources of revenue for the region. There are continuing problems, and yet there are new promises for all. The South has assured its future by providing education through public schools, colleges, and state universities. These benefits have reached the entire population, raising every standard in the region. The Southeast, 31 million Americans living and working in a region of long tradition, of achievement, and of great promise.
Yeah, so there we are. The extended, the longest, I guess they were talking about the longest hard time for agricultural stuff means that it's just hot and humid here all the time. And, which I don't like. Why am I here for that? I don't know. I should be living somewhere near the Arctic Circle where it's cold, because that's what I like, is cold weather. But maybe it's because I have Viking blood in me. I'm not sure. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in today. I very much appreciate you coming back, watching what we're doing. I should say that today, if our math is right, is the 993rd episode. And so that means like next week is going to be our 1000th episode, which I believe is going to be Wednesday. Again, if math is correct, but we're gonna actually celebrate it. Like we'll make note of it, but we will celebrate it on Saturday the 23rd, which is the weekend before Christmas. We will do a 1,000-minute show, which I believe is 16 hours and 40 minutes. We'll start at 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time on the 23rd, and we will go until 2:30-ish, 1:30. Yeah, I can't remember. Again, there's a lot of math with time and stuff. We'll have special guests, and we'll try to show as much stuff from the scanner as possible, and stuff that we haven't seen before. It would be easy to go back and say, like, hey, let's watch our favorite stuff, but I kind of want to make this a challenge. The other thing is we're going to do a fundraiser and raise money for new shelving, because we need a bunch, and allow you to adopt a shelf. And so we'll talk more about that as we get closer. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, hit the like button. There's some sort of notification bell that you can also hit. And that will let you know when we are going live, but also when we put new stuff online. We're still putting new things that we've scanned online because we're scanning all the time. Ideally, I'd like to get everything scanned. Copyright lawyers will not like that. So maybe I can't share some of that stuff, but we'll try to. That's what our goal is I want to share it however I can, and we'll figure out a way to do it. Everybody have a great rest of your day. If you wanted to donate to our cause today, you could go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks, or use the super thanks button. Those are great ways to say, hey, we like what you do. Anyways, everybody have a great rest of your day. Excuse me. And I'll see you on Tuesday. Everybody take care.